Ladies and gentlemen, I am Yozral and welcome to part 3 of the Hydra unboxing and painting series. We'll get around to painting, I hope, next time. Certainly we're just about hitting the point in the assembly where it needs to be started. For today's episode, however, we're going to look at two particular bits of the assembly. The first is the crew, or at least the gunner, and the second is going to be some of the more major battle damage on the hull. So we'll start with the gunner. Now, this is a slightly complicated little assembly. Start with the turret wing. The main part of the gunner's post, it slots into that. Then the outer ring comes down over it, and then the gunner normally stands on top, plugs in, and essentially the whole thing just rotates backwards and forwards, acting as a fixed post. However, that is complicated, messy, and awkward. There's also no other way to do it, if we want to use the Cadians. Happily, we are going to get rid of the Cadian, because Cadians, frankly, are wusses. Instead, we're going to replace him with a proper soldier of the Emperor. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the Death Korps of Krieg. Those of you who haven't heard of them, they are Forge World's personal Imperial Guard regiment, one of two actually, alongside the Elysian drop troops. And to say these guys are badass human lemmings is pretty much to sum it up. Many thanks to 1D4chan for coming up with that phrase. Essentially, their backstory is about as grimdark as it gets. Suffice it to say that one of the key elements was nuking out their own homeworld to stop a rebellion, followed by 500 years of attritional warfare, followed by the Administratum noticing, and instead of saying, "Hey guys, well done for getting your world back from the heretics," said, "You're 500 years behind on your taxes, cough up." Yes folks, the IRS are just as grim in 40k as they are in reality. At least, I don't think the IRS have ever had to come up with a 500-year nuclear civil war, but I dare say that's what they do. Anyhow, we need to adapt the kit a little. So, fortunately, turret and torso widths are all about the same. One of the nice things about Workshop staying to a more or less consistent scale, even if it has crept up over the years. So, we're going to take the turret post here, and we're simply going to join the arms and more importantly the turret controls. You can see there that the lining more or less works. You have got this trapezoid slanted shape on both sides that allows us to judge where the arms are going to have to join. So with a bit of care and attention we can just poly cement those together. That will give us a fixed width that we can then plug the Death Korps trooper into, and once that's done we can green stuff as necessary to plug in the gaps, pop the shoulder braces on, and hopefully paint everything up. So, first things first, cue the poly cement. As always, very little, especially with a tricky job like this. That might just be overkill, or it might be just enough kill. We'll find out in a second. So, pop that on. Hold while the weld starts. The other problem is that there is not enough plastic there to really put a pin into, so we have got to do this entirely with glue, which is not my preferred way of doing this at all. Weld up. Come on. Come on. There we go. There we go. Okay, so that's just about getting there. Okay, well, I won't pretend I'm entirely happy with the way that joins the lining up, but could be worse. Poly cement has squirted a touch. Let's just grab a sculpting tool and try and take some of that excess away. There we go. Yeah, that's not too shabby. The join looks okay, and such damage as there is we can cover with paint later on. Repeat with the other side. Tiny smidge of glue. Again, that may be a slight element of overkill, Even if it is a fraction of a drop, we'll just spread it out a little and take a bit of the excess off before attaching arm number 2 with extreme care. So, hold while the weld sets, check the alignment very carefully, and you can see there that we've now got a gap for the torso to fit into once this is all dried and properly set. We'll probably need to green stuff a few gaps, but that's the way of it. And the angle looks pretty good. Pretty good. In fact, as it happens, I think we can probably attach the shoulder braces immediately. Let's just have a look at the fit. Right, and down. Perfect. Okay, so again, drop of glue into the mounting hole. Yoink, bit of overkill. And then another wee smidge onto the side of the shoulder plate. Ideally, we want 2 points of contact here because this is going to be tricky. And then insert once, hold down once, and just check that this is coming out at a suitably dramatic angle, not like that. There we go, so that is decently in place. Rinse and repeat on the other side. Dab once. Oh, didn't want to bubble. That would have been bad. Dab twice. Are we bubbling up again? Yes, I think we are. Oh, there we go. And flip. Just once. And brace. Okay, so that is now nicely in place and should be a reasonable fit for our trooper. And here I am tempting fate by pushing the mounting immediately. Yeah, that will do with a bit of persuasion and a bit of green stuff if I need to plug some gaps later on. Once I've painted it, because this guy has got a lot of detail on the front, particularly his gas mask and his respirator, so I don't really want to have to try to get a paintbrush into there. It will be tricky as anything, and also horribly messy. So, pop that to one side until next time. Also, lose the polystyrene cement. Now, on to the fun stuff, battle damage. So, little bit of thought for a moment. A chimera of any description, be it a straight chimera, hellhound, basilisk, anything, is generally a support vehicle. This is an open top tank. It is armour 12 on the front, armour 10 on the sides and the rear. It is not meant to take heavy shell fire. Heavy shell fire will go straight through and leave a dent. So, in fact, it'll do a lot more than leave a dent. So, let's just quickly pop all the various plates together for a moment. Just give us an idea of how they line up. And there we go. So, where's this vehicle going to take damage? Well, it's going to take environmental damage on the underside, where the bottom of the track is smashed into obstacles during transit. It's going to take weathering, exhaust types along the side. We can do that with paint, likewise rust, mud, dirt, etc. Actual weapons fire, incoming damage, however, is mostly going to be on the front, at least anything that isn't going to immediately cripple or wreck the tank. So, let's start simulating some small caliber shell impacts. So, quick way of doing this is to grab a drill. I'm going to use a fairly narrow vise for a moment. Pick a point, and then drill in a hole. I didn't actually want to drill clean through the armour, but that's what I've done, so whoops. Oh well, we can always patch it. And in fact, a penetrating hit or two might not be a bad thing, just to keep the realism going. Now that is okay, I mean that's a hole, but it's a very neat hole, isn't it? It's precisely drilled. So we want to rough up the edges of it. This is where the knife comes into play. So we'll just work the knife blade in and take a small divot out there and keep doing that. So just generally working our way around, roughening up the edges, making it look like this was an impact in effect, something that had blasted a whole chunk of armour away and sent chips flying every which way around the edge of the hit. Basically, we're roughening it up. And that's not too bad at all. There we go. So, just pull this plate off for a sec. Get a better look at what we're doing. And I don't know how well the camera's going to pick this up, but you can see here that the knife work has basically roughened up the edges of the hole, so it now looks a bit more like a crater and a bit less like someone just took a drill and punched a hole through the model at random. In a similar vein, if you want to simulate a really sharp impact on the bottom of the hull, then without bothering with the drill, you can just take a knife blade, work in a small divot, a small cut on one side, then take an irregular divot out like so, and what you get is a nice, easy, irregular dent in the underside of the armour plating where clearly it's crashed into some significant obstacle, as opposed to just getting the paint chipped and scratched down to bare metal. Likewise, you can do the same on track guards. Really, anywhere on the model that offers us edge like that is a good candidate for having such a divot taken out. Or you can also alter the shape of the divots by altering the angle of the two cuts. So a relatively sharp impact, say a scrape from an anti-tank obstacle, will tend to produce something a bit narrower and more well defined. Keep those to a minimum, otherwise it just ends up looking like the vehicle is about to fall apart. Of course, if you're doing an orc vehicle, you might want it to look like it's about to fall apart, so personal taste. So that's the old-fashioned manual way of doing things. However, for some of us, there are quicker methods. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where I get to play with the power tools, so the audio may very well get completely wrecked. This is a rotary tool with a flexible drive shaft that's hooked up to a grinder. In fact, if I just rock the camera back for a second, you're going to see most of my recording set up here, but this can't be helped. Come on, pivot, pivot, pivot. And yeah, there we are. Behind the microphone, you can see the main power unit of the grinder. Just pop this back into place. Check my alignment. Yep, there we go. What you have then is a flexible drive shaft that feeds through to a tool that I can basically hold in a pen grip. And yeah, this is essentially a rotary high-speed file. Not much good for cleaning off model lines, mould lines and such like, because it tends to do too much damage. But very, very good for simulating this kind of effect. Now then, this, I think, is where the audio goes straight to hell. So, where are we going to start? Let's just... Okay, so this is the other problem with these grinders. Because they generate quite a bit of heat, they have a tendency to melt the plastic, so you get this kind of relatively smooth, almost irregular finish. Actually kind of useful if you want to simulate heat weapons like melters. But you can see that what's been able to do in just a few seconds are some small caliber bullet holes, a fairly significant shell strike that's taken a glancing hit off the side of the gun mantlet, as well as another one, again, moderate hit, again that's taken a chunk out of the armour. So, that pretty much simulates that. Like all battle damage, you want to keep it to a minimum. As I've said, you need to make it look realistic, not like it's a rolling junk heap that's about to fall apart. Unless you want it to look like a rolling junk heap, orcs in particular, that can be effective. Ditto some of the more ragtag chaos legions, vile heretics that they are. But I am going to leave it there for the moment, at least as far as major damage is concerned. Weathering and such like we'll do in the painting stage, which, yeah, I think we'll get onto that next episode, ladies and gentlemen. Until then, farewell.